calling you. The universe is calling me. It speaks both day and night. It's full of dark and light.
Hey everybody, welcome to SkyTour Radio on KGRAradio.com. This is Mark D'Antonio, your SkyTour Radio host, along with Amanda. Yay, Amanda! How are you, Amanda?
I'm well, thanks. How are you, Mark?
I'm fine. And we also have Daryl. Daryl Mason. What's happening?
Hi. Not much. Just finished dinner. Having a cup of tea.
Okay. Well,
a cup of tea.
Yeah, I know.
I hope everyone out there has a cup of tea for the show tonight.
Oh, yeah, they're gonna need some tea because tonight's show we're gonna actually be talking about some really cool things, and just remember that a lot of what we talk about on SkyTour Radio is stuff that you may already have seen in SkyTour Livestream. It's all things SkyTour with us, and that's where we come from. SkyTour Livestream is a clear night journey through the wonders of the deep sky, courtesy of our research-grade telescopes that we have in the domes. Well, two buildings coming up. We have one here in Connecticut, and we have one being built currently in the deep desert of Arizona, where the sky is so dark you can't see your hands in front of your face. And this one is in picturesque northwestern Connecticut, where we are now, and that we actually are broadcasting from the observatory control room of SkyTour Livestream. That's where our radio studio is, where we're broadcasting. And within SkyTour Livestream, we show you remnants of dead and dying stars, glittering jewel boxes of gorgeous star clusters, which will figure prominently into tonight's radio show, by the way, as we'll see. And we'll see these other wondrous phenomena in the universe, like stellar nurseries where stars are born and possibly where the sun itself might have been born. Another hint to tonight. And we're going to see these beautiful periodic interlopers that are called comets. And SkyTour Livestream just finished a viewing of comet Neowise in the last month. And it was a gorgeous comet. We caught it beautifully, and everybody joined us from all over the world to check it out. And it's basically a stream where you two are in charge. If there is something you want to see, then we will be happy to show you and take you there, you know. So, in addition, SkyTour Radio now has a call-in line. It's sponsored by the Paranormal app, found on Google Play or on iTunes. And we'll be opening the lines a little later, possibly in tonight's show. And then we'll give you that number at that time. So, you might say, well, what are we going to do tonight? I thought about it. And, Amanda is really incredibly diligent and found us a bunch of stories. She loves to go out and dig up stories that she thinks are interesting. Now, what she thinks interesting might not be what I think is interesting. However, so far so good. She's been batting 1,000. Everything she's brought up are things that we like talking about here too. So the first story has to do with our old friend Betelgeuse, the red supergiant, which makes up the Orion constellation. It's the upper left-hand bright orange star in Orion. And typically, Betelgeuse has been Alpha Orionis, the brightest star in the constellation. Well, historically, that's not remained the case because Betelgeuse is what's called a semi-regular variable. So it does dim and change its brightness over a period of time. It actually has two established cycles. One is every nearly 6 years, it goes through this dimming and brightening phase. But there's another cycle that happens every 425 days where it'll dim a little bit and then get brighter. And it has to do with the fact that stars at this age are going through this constant variability, and it has to do with what happens internally, which we'll get to, again, another hint about tonight. And the first dimming event that we saw of Betelgeuse was back in September of 2019 to February of 2020, and that was nicknamed the Great Fainting. Now, then it returned to normal, but here we go again. It's happening again. Now, what caused the last one? Well, astronomers tend to think that it was just what's called a sneeze, basically is how they characterized it. A sneeze of sorts. And Betelgeuse basically gave off a ton of material from its surface. And that explosive flaring event ended up producing lots of gas that as it left the star, it began to cool greatly, even more than it had been, because Betelgeuse is massive. And at those outer layers, you could even get molecules in the atmosphere that are forming because the temperature is so cool out there. And as that material was ejected from the star, it actually began to coalesce and gravitationally clump and formed matter, solid matter. So you can have a carbon atom, but if you get trillions upon carbon atoms all bonding together, well, then you can get, a bunch of molecular carbon up there. And this molecular carbon, essentially soot, was made in the outer atmosphere of Betelgeuse. And it reddens the light, and it also causes the light to be diminished a little bit. So that is what they think might have caused the first fainting spell that Betelgeuse had. But it's dimming again. And that's something interesting that was not expected. But then again, Betelgeuse has been fooling us for a long time and causing us to scratch our heads, So this dust obscured Betelgeuse for a period of time. And being that, we call Betelgeuse Alpha Orionis, what does that mean? It means that we actually use the Greek alphabet. And traditionally, the Greek alphabet would be set up so that, or we would use the Greek alphabet so that Alpha would be the brightest star, Beta would be the second brightest star, and Gamma and so forth. Now, as an astronomer, I've used the Greek alphabet so many times that I know it by heart. I don't have it in front of me, but it's Alpha, Beta, Gamma, Delta, Epsilon, Zeta, Eta, Theta, Iota, Kappa, Lambda, Mu, Nu, Xi, Omicron, Pi, Rho, Sigma, Tau, Upsilon, Phi, Keep, Psi, Omega. And I have no reference in front of me because that's just by memory because we've done it so many times through the years. And when we look at a star like Betelgeuse, okay, we know that these are very massive stars. It's probably 20 to 25 times the mass of our sun. And this means that the more massive the star is, the more shortened is its lifespan. Right, and that's due to the mass. The mass entirely decides what's going to happen to this star as it ages. All right. Now, you look at Betelgeuse now, and it's a bright red star in the constellation of Orion. But the fact is, Betelgeuse has not always been so. 4 million years ago, when Lucy walked in Olduvai Gorge, the Australopithecus afarensis, the early precursor to what would then be eventually Homo sapiens after a line of evolution. If Lucy looked up at Orion, she would not have seen a red star where Betelgeuse is. It would have been a bright blue star, like the belt stars are. It wouldn't have looked like a red star at all, because Betelgeuse has since entered this red giant phase. So it's kind of interesting that this has happened. And, basically, when we look at what's been going on at Betelgeuse, it's now in a phase where it's taking, it started by burning hydrogen into helium, and then it ended up starting to, when it ran out of hydrogen, it began to take helium and start infusing it into carbon, and then oxygen, right? And the thing that happens with these larger stars, and this is really interesting too, and Amanda will have to remind everybody about the spectral classes that we have of the stars and what they mean. And so, Amanda, if you're prepared, you can go ahead and tell people the letter mnemonics that we have recited over and over within the Sky Tour live stream.
Okay, my moment to shine. Well, it does. It helps mnemonics really work. I mean, when's the first time you told me, oh, be a fine guy, kiss me? That must have been close to 3 years ago, if not longer. And that's how I remember OBAGF.
Almost.
No, I switched it in my head. Hold on, I caught it too. OBAFGKM.
That is correct.
Okay. No, I knew I was saying it wrong, but it's "Oh, be a fine guy, kiss me," or "Oh, be a fine girl, kiss me." You can
Yeah.
substitute the G out, but it really works, and it's biggest, brightest, and or biggest, bluest, and hottest to smaller, redder, and cooler, but still pretty hot.
Yeah, exactly so. And she's that's pretty good for someone who didn't know any astronomy to begin with, guys. Let me tell you, because in that one sentence, she stated a lot of astronomy that she really understands in the background behind all of it. But she's right, and so when we look at that bright blue star that is where we see this brilliant red one today, we have to remember that Betelgeuse, being 25 solar masses, okay, it actually burned hydrogen into helium, kind of like the sun does now, for about 7 million years. Our sun, by comparison, is still doing it, and it's 4.6 billion years old, and it's going to do it for another 4 to 5 billion years. Okay, billion. Betelgeuse is done was done with that after 7 million years of its existence. And so once the hydrogen is exhausted in Betelgeuse, well, then the pressure outward to hold the star up from gravity trying to crush it is lessened. And so Betelgeuse will begin to contract. And that will heat up the core. And that'll heat the core up so hot that helium could then fuse. And helium would then fuse into carbon and other values, other elements in the periodic table, like carbon, maybe some oxygen and so forth. And that'll happen and last for about 500. That would have lasted for about 500,000 years. Okay, and then once that burning starts, once the fusing of the helium begins, and that core is hot enough, it'll begin to expand again. And once the helium gets exhausted, the star will again begin to contract, and then it'll heat up even more in the core. And finally, when those even higher temperatures are reached, the carbon can fuse to nitrogen and oxygen, and that'll last for about 600 years. And then the star will blow again while that's happening, because now a new energy source comes in. All right, and then that will happen. That process of contraction and bloating will continue. So nitrogen and oxygen will further get fused into other elements after it in the periodic table. That'll last for about a year. And then oxygen fusion, oxygen fusing into other elements, will last about 6 months. All right, and all the way along the way, there will be some type of fusion that leads to iron in the core. Okay, iron is number 26 in the periodic table, and it'll be an isotope of iron, a variation of iron that has more neutrons in its nucleus, so it's an isotope. All right, and then when the star begins, this is Betelgeuse we're talking about now, when Betelgeuse begins to fuse silicon, all right, that is something that lasts 1 day, only 24 hours. And when silicon is fusing, it's all over. And it means that what comes after it is the end. And now further elements have been made all along, as I said, and ending with iron 56. This is the isotope. So there's additional neutrons in the core of the iron atom, giving it an isotope value of 56. So it'd be iron 56. That's a very stable isotope. There's no energy released from fusion of iron into further elements. So when a star like Betelgeuse reaches this point and it doesn't have any more fusion products to fuse further, well, then fusion stops. And this is when the entire core of the star just collapses. And it collapses in 1/4 of a second. Now, considering that Betelgeuse overall envelope, that's not the core, but the overall envelope of Betelgeuse goes out beyond Mars, almost to Jupiter. The core is pretty darn big. All right. The core is going to be, at least part way to Mercury. And that entire core inside the star will collapse in 1/4 of a second. And when that happens, the gravitational ripple effect all the way throughout the star, all those outer layers are going to begin to converge on the center. Meanwhile, at the core, where the core collapse has already occurred, there's a rebound effect, and all those materials inside are now coming back out at very, very high speed and high energy. All right? And as it does, it's attacking and hitting with full force the material coming down and converging on the core. The overall effect is this is going to completely disrupt the star. All right. And that's the supernova. That's the point at which the star just goes and gone. If you could hear sound, I imagine it would be unlike any sound you've ever heard. So Betelgeuse might actually have reached this point already, but we don't know. All right. It's about, according to latest estimates, it's about 10,000 years from the end of this helium fusing phase, and then that means it's only going to have a few months to a year or two left after that. And then that fateful day will be left when silicon starts fusing, and then that's the end. So it could already have gone supernova, for all we know, if we got it wrong. 10,000 years is a blink of an eye in the cosmic scale, so we could possibly have this wrong. And the light train from Betelgeuse coming to Earth right now could include a supernova event at the tail end of it. We don't know. I really want to see a supernova. I really do. I just do. And I mean, those of you that follow Sky Tour livestream know that we actually looked at a supernova in a galaxy, thanks to Daryl. I believe you pointed it out to us, Daryl. Did you not?
Yep.
You know?
I forget which galaxy it was in now. It was in the Virgo supercluster.
Yeah, was it Messier 66, was it?
66 is under Leo, I believe. It was one of the Messier objects. I forget the number offhand now.
Yeah.
I'd have to go look it up.
See, one day I'm going to have the sky mapped out like these guys do. Someone will throw out a random Messier number and I'll say, no, that's in that section. No, that's over here. One day, I would love to be able to. It's very impressive to hear you guys do that.
Well, again, all the many years of looking at Messier objects. Actually, Amanda, why don't you remind people what the Messier...
I was just thinking that, yeah.
I knew it. Go ahead. Tell them.
Well, we're talking Messier. Now, you're going to be mad. I forget. Is there 110 Messier objects?
There are.
Oh, yay. Random guess, and I'm not good with numbers. So
Hardly.
There's 100.
Yes.
So there's what was his name? Charles Messier? Charles?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Another
he was
bit, yes.
He was looking for comets. Yes, comets.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, 3 for 3. I should stop while I'm ahead. Just
No.
Google them. I'll stop.
No.
Charles Messier was looking for comets. But every time he found anything that was not a comet, he just jotted a little note down and continued looking. So people found they were like nebulas and clusters and all sorts of fascinating things, just not his sought-after comets. So out of the 110, within not even 24 hours, but usually in March is the best shot, you can actually see all 110 throughout the night. And we're going to try to pull it off. So it's going to be an all-night thing. Bring your coffee and tea.
I did agree to that.
Yeah.
I did.
So do check out Sky Tour live stream on YouTube. I'll drop a link in chat on Discord.
I did.
And
yes, I did.
yeah, it's going to be an all-nighter, folks, from
It
dusk
is.
till dawn, basically.
Yep, I did agree. I
yeah.
did.
Yeah, you can hear the pain in his voice, but it'll be worth it. To say you at least did it once in your life, that's pretty cool, I think. So do join us, maybe in March.
Yeah, well, thank you, Amanda, because I wanted to give you a chance to tell people about the Messier catalog and Charles Messier. And we can't talk about astronomical objects sometimes without talking about the people that found them and some of the history associated with these people from the 19th and 18th centuries even. Because our astronomy today is founded on some of the many studies of the objects that they found. Now, yes, we would have refound them, I guess, with our technology, but many times our technology is brought online because of a question that arose that was unanswered for a century or more. So we all stand on the shoulders of giants when we do astronomy. And if I say, I'm an astronomer, and I look up into the sky with a proud arrogance of some kind, that just doesn't sit well with me, because everything we know came from someone before all of us. And we are lucky enough to find some things. I found some really cool things that are happening in the galaxy that no one knew about until I did my work in astronomy. But still, when you look at the concepts, when you look at the overall picture of astronomy, the overall values we believe and hold dear in astronomy, it came from people that were working with gear that was so incredibly inefficient by today's standard, and so incredibly poor in quality by today's standards. The Sky Tour Livestream Telescope, had Charles Messier had that one, the Messier catalog would have around 10,000 objects. Okay, maybe more, maybe by far, because he would have had a capability to see things that would have kept him busy. Well, he couldn't die. He'd have to stay alive to keep looking because there's so many more objects. He'd never get them all in. See, so I think the thing that's interesting here is that everything we know about astronomy comes from the fact that we look at the very light itself coming to us. That's all we've got. Biologists, they have samples. They can touch them. They can slice them. They can put them on a microtome, put thin slice, and actually look at thin slices of cells and study the biology, collect the sample, go on a spree, like Darwin did, collecting samples all around the world. But we don't have that option. We might be able to collect a moon rock or two and maybe a Martian meteor if we can find one in Antarctic ice. But beyond that, we don't have anything that's hands-on for us. It's all about the light. Now, yes, we can go to comets now. We went to Churyumov-Gerasimenko and some asteroids, asteroid Bennu, Ryugu, the Japanese are at Ryugu, and we're even returning samples from them. But they're very expensive, highly costly projects to do this, and they may fail. It's amazing to think about how many people actually failed getting to Mars in terms of getting a robotic mission to Mars. There's a lot of failures going to Mars. There's a lot of failures going to the moon. And the moon is our nearest neighbor, right? So you think, well, we can get there pretty easy. Well, yes and no. I mean, the easy part is kind of like getting there isn't so bad because we go on coast after a while. We cruise. But you have to send the spacecraft in a direction that doesn't have Mars in it, until you get there. You have to go to where Mars is going to be, not where it is now, or you'll miss it. So there's a lot of considerations. And so we spend a lot of money to do these things and to get our portable laboratories to places we want to explore in our solar system. But when it comes to the stars, well, that's still out of reach for us. In 100 years, it won't be. 150 years, it won't be. 300 years from now, it might be commonplace to go to the nearest stars, in about 5 or 10 days. And that's actually not, made up science fiction. That's actually factual data based on some of the current research. Being able to circumvent light speed, for instance. That's not something that we can do now, but it is definitely something that we could do. And that will allow us to literally build things like a warp drive. Yes, I know you're thinking Star Trek, all right? But that's not only science fiction, all right? Just ask Miguel Alcubierre. He was talking about warp drive back in 1994. So that said, I think that it's really important to understand that where we're going to go with this will be someplace that will allow us to use the information coming to us from the stars, and we will be able to use the light reaching us to make all of our decisions. That's all we've got. That's all we've got. So Betelgeuse might already have gone supernova, and we don't know it yet. All right, but we might see it happen if the light train finally reaches us. So that's Betelgeuse, and just remember, if we get any kind of indicator that there's something brewing in the deep interior of Betelgeuse, we'll let you know. All right. Now, the next thing is, and I have to just mention this to Daryl here. What happened just a few days ago on August 19th? That was just this past Wednesday. Does anyone know what happened? Daryl, do you know what happened this past Wednesday? A very significant event in astronomy.
I don't know.
Exactly. See, that's not the wrong answer, actually.
Was this the close pass by the mini asteroid?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Okay, so Daryl did know. See, it's hard to fool the guy. What can I tell you? But I try. But here, the report starts with the words, "We didn't see it coming." Okay? We didn't see it coming. Yeah, that fills you with warmth. I just think I'll, open up a soda and sit outside on my porch in the heat, and say, hey, we didn't see it coming. I better enjoy this soda now. Well, as you can imagine, it means that we did just have a near miss by an asteroid that we did not even know was there. How far away? 1,830 miles. Now, that's just a little less than the distance from Washington, D.C. to Phoenix. Okay? That's the closest ever recorded other than those that actually struck us in the past. Now, you might say, what? An asteroid? The question is, how did we miss it? Well, for one thing, it came in from the sun. And it's not from the sun. That's not where it originated from, meaning it came from the direction of the sun. So it came in our daytime sky. We didn't have it. We couldn't see it during the daytime sky, so we couldn't see it coming toward us. So that explains why we didn't see it coming. And for another, it was actually the size of a Tesla. Yeah, no, Starman wasn't coming home after an extended journey. It was just a vehicle-sized asteroid. And it's been given the name 2020 QG. All right. And it was moving 7.7 miles per second. That's 12.4 kilometers per second, or 27,600 miles an hour, 44,000 kilometers per hour. Now, you say to yourself, well, man, it's 7 miles per second. Holy cow, what if that hit us? Well, I'll tell you what, let's go through it, shall we? If we assume it's dense rock and not iron to begin with, and let's assume that based on the way it passed us, it might have struck us at about a 25-degree glancing angle, okay? Well, this object would have broken up at about 159,000 feet, okay, at that speed of entry, 7 miles per second. It would have started breaking up all the way up at 159,000 feet, okay? So really, it's in very, very thin atmosphere up there, okay? And the energy released from this would be about 0.0074 megatons. Now, again, it's the size of a car. Only very small fragments would actually reach the ground, and that's kind of how that might come about, right? And we might not even notice it, right? We might hear a noise and say, what was that? And look around and then say, well, pass me some more of that turkey. You wouldn't really think too much of it. But what if it was made of solid iron? Okay, and this is a very common type of asteroid and meteor as well. So it's not a bad thing to think about. Maybe what if it was solid iron? We were talking about somewhat dense rock before. What about solid iron? Well, first thing that we would notice is that it would make it through the atmosphere and it would hit the ground. And it would hit the ground with an impact speed of 3.3 miles per second. Now, the energy released into the atmosphere would be about 0.055 megatons because it's more dense. And it would actually make a 450-foot or 111-meter diameter crater. 450 feet. Yeah, so that would just ruin everybody's day. If it hit your house, that's the end of it, right? And it would be a standard bowl-shaped crater, something that we call a simple crater, right? A simple crater. And as far as comparison to known craters, that would just be slightly smaller than Meteor Crater in Arizona. So now, what if you were 10 miles away from this impact? Okay, this iron fragment coming down, okay, the size of a car. If you were 10 miles away from the impact, you'd feel the ground quake from the impact about 3 seconds after the impact. And the magnitude on the Richter scale would be 2.7. You might not even really feel it. But at the 10-mile distance, the air blast and the sound of the impact would arrive 49 seconds later, and it would have a wind speed of a whopping 2 miles an hour, or 0.9 meters per second. And the noise would be about as loud as heavy traffic. All right. We actually see such impacts here about every 3 years, believe it or not. All right. Now, I know there's questions out there and everything, but I'm going to go through the rest of this, and then we'll address the questions. Now, what about the Tunguska explosion? Remember that one? The projectile was thought to be a porous to slightly dense rock, about 60 meters to 200 feet in diameter. Now, that would break up at around 59,900 meters, or 196,000 feet. And the projectile burst into a cloud of fragments at an altitude of around 18,000 feet, or 5,700 meters. And the residual velocity of these fragments after this airburst was around 3.5 miles per second, or 5.7 kilometers per second. But because of the size, 60 meters or 200 feet in size, the energy of this airburst was a whopping 13 megatons. Okay. Now, this was an airburst. No crater was formed, although some large fragments have been thought to reach the ground, but were never found. If you were 10 miles away from that, 10 miles now, the air blast would arrive about 52 seconds after impact. The peak overpressure, meaning how much pressure would be down on top of your head, would be about 5 psi in addition to the 14.7. So your ears would definitely feel it. The maximum wind velocity, though, that you would feel from this impact blast, when the blast arrived, was 162 miles an hour, or 72.6 meters per second. That's really heavy duty, right? The sound intensity would actually cause some serious ear pain. It would be 91 decibels. Now what about the Arizona meteor at Meteor Crater? How about that one? That one was thought to be about 40 meter diameter projectile in space, solid iron, and it hit at about 45 degrees to the atmosphere. And it came in at 20 kilometers per second and it hit into this solid sedimentary rock structure. Now, this thing started to break up at around 54,000 feet, all right, 16.7 thousand meters. Okay, so 16. So the projectile reaches the ground in a broken condition, most likely, and the mass of the projectile strikes the surface at a velocity of around 9.9 kilometers per second, or 6 miles per second. That is a heck of an impact energy, and that hit the energy here there in Arizona at about 3 megatons of energy. That's a pretty good size hit. And the broken fragments would strike the ground in sort of an ellipsoidal distribution because of the breakup and how they would hit. So they kind of land kind of like a shotgun blast and buckshot. It would come in sort of like an oval pattern, slightly oval. And if you were 10 miles away, the air blast would arrive about 48.8 seconds after impact. The overpressure, the extra pressure you'd feel, you'd definitely feel in your ears, would only be about 1 psi. But the maximum wind would be about 38.9 miles per hour. Sound intensity about as loud as traffic. Damage description: in a modern world, we would actually see glass windows would shatter. Seismic effects would be 3.2 seconds after the impact. At 10 miles, you'd feel a Mag 5 earthquake. It'd be felt indoors. People outdoors would feel it. Felt during the day, at night. Some people would be awakened. Dishes, windows, doors would all be disturbed. The walls would make a cracking sound. You'd feel like a heavy truck hit the building, So cars would be rocking noticeably from this. And it'd be felt nearly by everybody. Some dishes, windows would be broken, all that stuff. Going through the calculations has been kind of an interesting thing here, So there's one more, too, that I'm sure some of you are wondering about. What about a famous impact to compare this asteroid, this little tiny asteroid that's coming to us? What about the Chicxulub impact? Now, that's the impact that, of course, eventually killed the dinosaurs, all right? when it produced a pall of dust that went around the world in the upper stratosphere, causing light to be diminished, reaching the Earth, which killed the plants, which killed the plant eaters, which killed the meat eaters that ate the plant eaters. The domino effect continued, except for those killed immediately. It ended with the deaths of the dinosaurs and a complete reboot of the ground fauna on the Earth. Okay, so in that one, the crater that was opened up by this impact had a diameter of 163 kilometers or 101 miles, right? And it hit off the Yucatan Peninsula, and it really formed in the seafloors where this crater formed, and the final crater diameter was 113 miles in diameter. Imagine that, right? 182 kilometer diameter crater. And the final crater depth was almost a mile. All right, so that was quite a chunk of earth that was excavated by this thing, and the crater that was formed there was actually a complex crater. Now, we talked about a simple crater before, a bowl-shaped crater from a smaller impact. Meteor crater is a bowl-shaped, simple crater, right? Many of the moon craters are simple craters, the smaller ones, but some of the big ones and some of the Chicxulub impact there were complex craters. They actually would have central peaks, and they'd have concentric rings created in the impact that are systemic to these particular types of impacts. So when we talk about Chicxulub, the volume of the target that was melted or vaporized was literally 2,300 cubic miles of Earth. That's almost 9,500 cubic kilometers, and roughly half of that melt would remain in the crater, where the average thickness of it was like literally just 3/4 of a mile. Now, at our position, 10 miles from ground zero, well, we wouldn't survive. We would actually be part of the ejected Earth that's heading up into the sky. We'd be part of those cubic miles of Earth, heading back up into space from the impact. So we'd be sent packing big time. Now, what if we were 50 miles from the impact? 50, whole miles. That's a good distance. The debris and the ejected material from the crater, we call ejected material ejecta, would arrive about 2 minutes from impact. We'd see it coming in the air. We'd see this large wall of material going up, blotting out the sun if it could, and then it would be raining down upon us. And the average depth of that ejected material falling on our heads would literally be about 1 mile. That's 1.6 kilometers, right? And the average size of the debris elements, like the rocky pieces, would be about 2 meters or 7 feet on average. There'd be a bunch of small stuff along with dust, but the average size of this stuff would be literally about 7 feet across or 2 meters. Now, Chicxulub did not strongly disturb the Earth, and very little mass was lost from the Chicxulub impact. The Earth's orbit wasn't changed at all, right? However, it did have a major effect on life here, didn't it? It completely rebooted life on this planet. In fact, without the Chicxulub impact, then we might be admiring each other's yellow eyes and tails and scales and possibly dinosaur feathers, for all we know, if we even could develop intelligence as a reptile species. And for those that are thinking, hey, could that be where reptilian stories come from? Well, yeah, keep that in mind. It's possible. And I think that if you think about it, that's possible. What would happen? We don't know the answer. See, that's the beauty of this. We don't know the answer. So the Chicxulub impact would not cause any major changes to the Earth, but it did reboot life. Okay. However, if we were 50 miles away, the major seismic shaking event would arrive around 16 seconds after the impact. And the Richter scale magnitude would be 10.3. That's greater than any in recorded history, right? The tsunami and earthquake off Japan was close. But we know what would happen to modern buildings and so forth. Most would be destroyed. Very serious damage would occur to dams and embankments, and large landslides would occur. Water would be thrown onto the banks of canals, etc. sand and mud would be shifted, rails would be bent for railroad travel, underground pipelines would be out of service, for years. But then about 4 minutes later, the air blast would arrive, and at our 50-mile distance, the peak overpressure would be 14,000 psi, more than 1,000 times the pressure. So if you were outside, you would be killed. That would be 1,000 psi overpressure on you from this impact. And if that wasn't enough, then the maximum wind velocity that would go racing by you 50 miles away would probably be enough, because it was actually about 17,000 miles an hour. That was pretty. That's 7,900 meters per second. That's amazingly intense. And the sound intensity would be 160 decibels. That's dangerously loud. What kind of damage would it do? Use your imagination. Imagine trees, imagine buildings, and then just imagine flat. Okay? But you know what? If you somehow survived that because you were in a shelter and you came out and said, wow, that's amazing. And if you came out and said, now what happens? You would find that the thermal radiation wave will have come through minutes earlier, and that would actually be enough to have killed you anyway. Okay, because at 50 miles you would still be inside the fireball. All right. It's 640 times larger than the sun. The thermal exposure would be just immense, and you'd have to endure it for almost an hour. It would take an hour for that to abate. And incidentally, relative to the sun, it'd be 37,000 times the radiant energy of the sun at that point. So, let's be honest, what can survive that? And I think you know the answer. Not a whole lot. And if that's not enough, let's suppose you were 250 miles away. Okay, none of that would happen to you. Oof, you wouldn't worry about the thermal wave so much. But you do have to worry about the tsunami. Okay, at 250 miles away, you'd see a 133-foot wall of water heading towards you after the tsunami. And it would, depending on where you are, it would reach you in a few hours. All right. By Tampa, from the Yucatan, that height drops to about 90 feet. And by New Orleans, it's about 45-foot tsunami. In Corpus Christi, Texas, it would have been a 40-foot tsunami. So what am I doing here? This exercise serves to show the importance of having a near-Earth object program to find such initial impactors, potential impactors, before they actually would have already whizzed by us. Because some of them won't whiz by us, they'll whiz into us, and we don't want that. Now, so that's just our segment from the two stories that Amanda had provided us. And I know that there's some questions out there, Amanda, so why don't we look at those now? Because I think Daryl was interested in going to one and says he could address them. But read us the questions, will you?
Well, one was going back, actually. There was some interest in the Messier Marathon, and Lauren wanted to know if we could actually do that at the autumn equinox as well.
Okay.
I thought I remembered something about it being possible in October, but for some reason March was better. Daryl, do you want to touch on that?
Sure. Lauren, the thing that controls this is the fact that the Messier objects are not evenly spread across the sky. There are rich areas of the sky and there are poor areas, where there are no Messier objects. And that happens to coincide with why March is a good time. Where the sun is in the sky is an area that is basically has no Messier objects. I may be oversimplifying a bit, but this is basically it. Sunset, pretty much all the Messier objects are queued up, ready to look at as soon as it gets dark. There are none behind the sun at that point where we wouldn't be able to see them. And there are rich areas and poor areas over the course of the night, all the way till morning where the sun is again. And again, we run out of Messier objects ideally before the sun comes up.
Right.
Does that make
sense? There you go. Very much. I think Daryl was the first one that told me about the Messier Marathon, actually. So If
Oh,
you guys all have lack of
it's
sleep
all-
for that week or that day, you can blame him.
Thanks, Daryl.
No,
You had
I
the color, didn't
how
you?
could you not? How could you not want to take that challenge as astronomers? Come on.
Well,
That's got to be like a bucket list thing, right? You got to at least do the marathon, the Messier marathon once in your life. No.
done this
I've tried it before and I fell asleep.
I've done it before and not been able to find some of the objects. So
There are some areas, the Virgo supercluster, for instance, galaxy season, where there are so many that you may get lost in there trying to nail them all down.
that's exactly right. Yeah, when you look at a chart, folks, a chart that has galaxies listed on it, and it's usually the galaxies we're talking about. There are some Messier galaxies that are just right up against a lot of the other galaxies from another catalog called the New General Catalog, NGC. And there are thousands of NGC objects, a lot of galaxies, many are galaxies. And then there's Messier objects sprinkled in there as well. So how do you know you're looking at the Messier object? Well, if you're trying to just run your telescope by hand to these things and do star hopping to get there, you run the risk of missing one. But if you're using our observatory telescope and we say go to Messier, 66, well, it's going to go to Messier 66, and that's going to be in the view. All right, so I guess that's, in a sense, that might be cheating, but it's a way that everybody watching can see every Messier object in one night.
Yep.
Right?
That was considered cheating at one time.
I know it. And we have another question too. Ronald asks, and Amanda, I know you would have asked it, but I see it in front of me here. What's your favorite area of the sky? Daryl, why don't you answer yours, and I'll give mine after you tell everybody yours.
It's two different areas. I will split the difference, I guess. Summer sky, Sagittarius, and following the Milky Way. And then wintertime, it's got to be Orion.
Okay. Same thing, Ronald. For me, I love the Sagittarius star cloud and its environs around it. I really like the stellar nurseries and the dark nebulae that are down there. And Orion used to be my favorite secondary location, actually. But now, favorite secondary location is not Orion anymore. It's actually it's actually part of the Cygnus Milky Way moving into the northern sky in Cepheus and Cassiopeia. There are really, really cool objects there, which, give you an example. They have one of the names, a flaming star nebula. I mean, when you look at this, it's gorgeous, when you look at some of these others, like we looked at the Bubble Nebula the other night, right? And it's beautiful too. And when we look in Cygnus, we look at things like the Crescent Nebula, which is a beautiful, expanding, billowing dust cloud, or not dust, but gas that is being caused to glow by a very, very hot star called a WR star, or Wolf Rayet. Wolf, WOLF, Rayet, RAYET. And these Wolf Rayet stars do some really interesting things to the surrounding environment, and they're very, very, very hot. So there's so many varied objects. And if you go to Orion, Orion is still a favorite because of the Orion Nebula, yes, for sure, and the Horsehead and the Flame and all these other beautiful objects, all right? And there's a number of little ones like the Rubber Stamp Nebula, okay, which are right down below the Orion Nebula that people don't usually go to, but has a really interesting look and morphology. And then there's planetary nebulae back in Cygnus, okay, which are really cool, along with near Cygnus, there is the Dumbbell Nebula. And then in Lyra, we have the Ring Nebula. Different types of nebulae for the same type of death of a star event. So it's a very worthwhile teaching moment to go there and show people that. Like yesterday, we looked at a very interesting set of stars in Cepheus and Cygnus, stars that are on something called the asymptotic giant branch. They have stopped fusing hydrogen into helium, and so they have become superluminous stars. So they also have become cooler. So as they expand, and they turn blood red in color, and they're called carbon stars. And the carbon stars have this excess of, as you guessed it, carbon in their outer atmospheres. And because the stars are so big and it's so cool out there, just like with Betelgeuse, the carbon atoms and the other material out there can actually become dust rather than gas. I mean, the molecules coalesce and form a dust. And in the atmospheres of these carbon stars, it is indeed like a soot, S-O-O-T, a soot, like from a fire. And this soot causes the star's color to go from orangey to very, very deep red. And when we say deep red, well, you can go to the Sky Tour live stream Facebook site, and later on tonight or tomorrow I should have uploaded the carbon stars that we photographed the other night. All right, it's just unbelievable to see just how red a star can actually be for real, and not using filters either.
I just actually went to our Facebook group and stole the picture you posted for someone. I forget who asked, but someone specifically asked for a picture of the Bubble Nebula, and
Yes.
we were talking about it in chat, and I just put it up. It's unreal to believe that's like a real object in the universe. Like it looks photoshopped. It looks like an artist created it.
Yeah, and it was not. It was actually, that's exactly how it looks.
It's unreal. Check it out in Discord in the chat room for KGRA.
And for those who can get into it, for those who can't get into it, you can kick the seat in the wall and say, all these little colorful epithets.
Or you can go to our Facebook Sky Tour
Yes.
live stream page.
Right, that's right. You can go to the Sky Tour live stream page on Facebook, as Amanda says. Because we always put all the photos up there. And I don't always get them up there right after each session. So I've got like 3 or 4 days worth of images to put up, and of course I will put in descriptions because I love doing that, because people love to see these pictures. They love to see the images of the universe. And one of the things that I keep doing, here's something that I like to do. Some people look at the moon and say they can see an atmosphere and vegetation. Okay, literally they say that. That's, of course it's not true, but I look at objects over and over again, and I take photos of them over and over again. And people say, well, why are you looking at the same object like 10 times a year? I mean, why, it's the same object, right? No, the universe is a dynamic place. We could see differences depending on how far away things are. We could see differences. When Comet Neowise came through, in the course of one night, we saw it move across the night sky, and you could see it moving against certain, the background of the stars. We could see it moving against those stars, over the course of just about an hour and a half. So, depending on where you are. And then there's other stars that are moving through, like Barnard's star. It's a very fast-moving star, and it's about 6 light years away from us. I think that if we look at that star, we can look at it, say, tomorrow night and note its position. And if we come back 10 months from now, we'll see that the star itself has changed position in the sky. And it's because of the fact, number one, the Earth is moving around the sun, and so we see the parallax, that is the motion of that star because it's so close against further background stars. But the star is also moving very fast through the interstellar medium. And part of that motion is going to be because the star itself is moving. And that's really cool to see that motion. It really is. Anyway, I think before we take the break, I think we had another question out there, Amanda, right?
We do. I'm not sure if we'll have time to answer it in full before the break, but this is going back to
a minute, yeah.
Yeah, but Charles wanted to know about the if the close pass, if that would change the orbit of the object, maybe even kick it out a bit further when you were talking about the near Earth orbits. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, the asteroid, when it passes, it's going to pass, as Charles suspects, it's going to pass close enough so that the Earth's gravitational field is going to change its orbit. It's going to make it whip around the Earth effectively. And so it's definitely going to change the position of where it's going, where it thought it was going versus where it's going to go. And what we can do is we can calculate and figure out how and when and why it's doing what it's doing, and if it'll ever actually hit us. Now, in that particular asteroid's case, if it hits us, we won't even notice. The Earth will shrug it off and go, "What's that? A flea?" It's not even going to notice it. And you might, if you're lucky enough to see it, it'll come in like a big meteor, and that's about it. So, in any case, I think that's pretty cool. Thanks, Charles, for that question and for the other questions coming in earlier. But you know something? We're going to take a break right now. You've already listened to a full hour of Sky Tour Radio. Holy cow, man. But Daryl and Amanda and I will be back in just a few minutes, so stick around, folks. We'll be right back.
I'm getting older and noticing that my body just doesn't work as well as it used to. So I like to keep fit as possible by hitting the gym a few times a week. Recently, I started having a nagging bicep pain, and it got so bad I couldn't even lift the weights. When I was complaining about it to a friend, he told me about Angioprim. He said chelation helps remove toxins, heavy metals, and cholesterol in veins and arteries that may cause blockages. After just 1 week of taking Angioprim, the pain was gone, and now I'm back in the gym full strength. Scientific research proves the active ingredient in Angioprim has superior oral chelation action that helps promote cardiovascular health. So to learn more, go to angioprim.com. That's ANGIOPRIM.com, or talk to a trained consultant. Call Angioprim toll-free at 945-882-7221. You'll feel better with more energy. That's 945-882-7221. Or go to the website, angioprim.com.
Folks, this is very important information. What's to be said about CBD? AncientLifeOil.com. Our CBD is made from hemp and has 0.003 THC, which means this wonderful product won't get you high, no matter what amount you take. What does CBD do for the body? My hands are tied. But you can Google CBD benefits and be astounded. When you're finished reading, you'll want to log on to AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com and purchase. Life is good when you feel good. People are tired of pain. People are asking for non-GMO organic products to help them with, you fill in the blank. Legal in 49 states, and again, our CBD is made from hemp. Ancient Life Oil is about helping people one by one by one. If you wonder how good the product is, the CEO takes it every day without miss. AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com. Have a great day.
Permanent industrial glue impossible to remove? Not anymore, because Handyman Formula by D-Bond is a patented chemical adhesive remover. It's used in the building and home maintenance industry, but now it's available for your home use, for your DIY projects. Unglue stickers, silicone rubber, labels, price tags, flex tape, weather stripping, carpet glue, wood glue, liquid nails, even 3M 5200. And it dissolves graffiti. Yeah, graffiti. Handyman Formula by D-Bond works, and it's safe to use on most surfaces. No need to call a professional. Don't get out the pliers and blowtorch. Just apply a little Handyman Formula by D-Bond and wait 90 seconds, then quickly and easily pull the items apart. Get unstuck. Visit DBondHandymanFormula.com. That's DBondHandymanFormula.com, or call 561-575-4200. Handyman Formula by D-Bond.
Hey everyone, this is Nick Redfern, and you're listening to Sky Tour Radio with Mark D'Antonio on the KGRA network, and so are the Men in Black.
You listen to us, and we listen to you. And so does the CIA. KGRARadio.com.
Hey, welcome back to Sky Tour Radio. This is Mark D'Antonio once again, and I am here again with Daryl and Amanda, the two most important people on this show. Because, listening to what Amanda has said over the last several years, as she's become part of Sky Tour Livestream and Sky Tour Radio, has actually been quite impressive. I can't believe some of the things that she says. She's really got it going. She knows what she's talking about. And she'll say she doesn't, but, something she knows a lot more than she realizes. And, of course, Daryl, what can you say? I mean, Daryl is a consummate astronomer. He's, I call him the astronomer's astronomer, and I think that that's appropriate for his knowledge. So,
Humbug.
Yeah, humbug. I just want them to know that I do appreciate them, and I say publicly what I think. So now, moving forward, we heard about all these impacts last time, but now, all those impactors that could strike us and all that stuff that's out there that we study, this is literally looking at a snapshot of the universe as it formed locally, right? For our solar system here, it was a snapshot. Everything that's in our solar system is a snapshot of how it was back at the beginning. The Kuiper Belt is still as it was back during formation, out past Neptune. Those icy bodies are still orbiting the sun as they have always been, and they're still in hibernation, basically, unless they get bounced out of the Kuiper Belt and come into the inner solar system. They're not going to get any solar radiation to cause them to outgas and, well, possibly become comets or cometary-like objects. So, when we talk about the formation of all of these many objects, we really basically are really asking about when we're asking about how did the solar system form, and how does this relate to how exoplanets form around other stars? Many of you know I'm an astronomer. My concentration that I've studied after my degree in astronomy was exoplanets, because I feel that you study exoplanets if you want to get an idea about whether there's extraterrestrial life of any kind out there. And my opinion is that there is. And, of course, people will be out there saying, well, of course there is, It's like, yeah, well, you feel that there is. There must be, but you need to have science to back you up to say why and show the possibilities. And so that's where this comes in. That's where my philosophy comes in. We use science as the basis for that understanding. So when we look at how planets around another star can form, we can't shy away from looking at how the Earth formed here in our solar system. So we formed the way the Earth formed was out of a process called the solar nebula hypothesis. That's the considered opinion right now. And things could change. Who knows? Now, why did the sun form when it did? Well, the sun formed when it did possibly because there was a supernova somewhere else. And the shockwave came through. And as the shockwave came through, it compresses stuff ahead of it like a snowplow. Right? We saw that. Daryl even commented on it with the Veil Nebula the other night when we were looking at the Veil Nebula in Sky Tour Livestream. You can see these very fine filaments at the leading edge where it's expanding out into the interstellar medium. And he asked, could those be areas that are being compressed? And that's a very intelligent question, because the answer is absolutely. And they are. It depends what they're running up against in the interstellar medium. And so these shockwaves from previous supernovas could have caused initial collapses of dust clouds in our region of space. And that initial collapse could have kicked off the formation of our proto-sun, the early sun, and thus the planets after that. So matter from these previous star explosions ended up getting spread throughout the interstellar medium. And how does that actually happen? Well, first way that you may imagine is through supernovae. When a star explodes, this stuff just goes outward, and it keeps on going. We see the remnants of supernovae And we know that in those remnants is a rich assortment of elements that have been blown out of the star. Some of the elements were made in the star originally, and some of the elements were already in the star when it was made from other explosive events earlier that the star was then made from. So when the supernovas explode, the typical way is in a supernova explosion called a core collapse. Now, we talked about a little bit about the core collapse, and that rebound effect causes these huge pressures. And it literally, at that point, when the core collapses after no more fusion fuel is left of any kind, then that rebound effect is causing such a massive trauma to the star that it actually starts making more elements in that process. All right? It's like a last effort before the star is completely destroyed. And large stars, as we said previously, can make up to iron, which is number 26 in the periodic table. That ugly old table that you don't want to remember from your high school chemistry classes or whatever, or college. But that table is really a gem. It tells you a lot about the universe and what you're made of. Because Carl Sagan, my favorite astronomer, said that we are made of star stuff. And I'll bet you were just wondering why I didn't do that as Carl Sagan. Well, I like to impersonate Carl Sagan like that. Well, the answer is because it's really I didn't want it to be a distraction. The periodic table is literally the very thing that makes the universe what it is. Okay, we could not have anything that we have on Earth without the periodic table's elements having been created the way they were. All we did was chart them. All we did was figure out what they are. They've always been there. There's a panoply out there of elements, over 90 of which are made by natural processes in the stars. The rest are typically laboratory synthesized. Could some have been synthesized in some stellar formation somewhere? Yeah, maybe. But the thing is, those large stars can make up to iron number 26 in that periodic table. And beyond that, the thing is, beyond that, the reactions to make new elements don't liberate energy. To get to iron, every single atomic fusion process liberates more energy, okay? And that net energy that's liberated is what keeps the star going. But if the star didn't liberate energy but absorbed more energy to do a process than it gave back, then see, that's not on the plus side for a star. That's exactly the wrong thing. And that's what is the case with iron. Iron in big stars is where it ends. You don't get anything past iron. So you're just going to say, well, what about everywhere else? I mean, we have all these other elements in the periodic table. That's 26, and there's like 118, up to 90 that is made in the stars. So how does that happen? Well, it does effectively end at iron, that's true. But there are caveats. But for the most part, that's true. So supernovae will seed the interstellar medium. There's another way, though. There's a second way that these previously spoken of stars can seed the interstellar medium with the bounty of beautifully crafted atoms just for you, brought to a table near you. And it's called neutron capture, or the slow process, or the S process. It occurs in stars about the size of the sun, and a bit larger and a little bit smaller. And what happens is these higher elements, well above iron, can be made in the sun. And we talked before about this in the past, but basically the reactions we just talked about, where they are giving off energy with every fusion process up to iron, gives off energy. Well, you also get neutrons that are given off by these other reactions. And some of those neutrons get captured by some of the nuclei of these other atoms in a star. So, for instance, if you have a helium atom and it captures a neutron, well, it becomes not a carbon atom, okay, or not a boron. They're not something that's, after helium in the periodic table. It becomes first an isotope of helium. And that's not another element. That's actually just a variation of the same element. So adding a neutron to a nucleus of any atom just makes it a different variation of the same atom. Okay? You have to have that neutron changed to a proton, okay, to actually make it another element in the periodic table, because the periodic table is defined by the number of protons. 1 for hydrogen, 2 for helium, okay, 3 for lithium, 4 for beryllium, and so forth. And it goes on and on. So now we have these extra neutrons, all right, and they just add mass. And it just changes the isotope of the atom, all right? So what happens to a neutron? Neutrons don't typically sit there and just do nothing. They will go through something called beta decay, all right? And this beta decay process is a process by which particles are emitted from an atomic nucleus that then transform the neutron into a proton, all right? So that's a process that takes a long time in stars like the sun. But during this beta decay, the neutron is turned into a proton. Now, how can that happen? Now, you got to remember here, the idea is to see how higher elements in the periodic table are created. And so far, we see how supernovae can create them, and we see how variations of the atoms can be created, the isotopes, by adding additional neutrons to the nucleus. Okay, we can get that far. But how do these isotopes become atomic nuclei of higher numbered elements in the periodic table? We need just a little bit of background here. Protons and neutrons are fundamental particles. And for the longest time, we thought that that's the smallest particles there were. But it turns out that protons and neutrons are actually made of smaller particles still. And those particles are called quarks. Quarks, quarks. And the types of quarks that make up protons and neutrons are quarks called up and down quarks. I know, quarks have charm too, all right? And there's truth quarks. I mean, look, the naming process is what it is, right? Truth, beauty, charm. We love our quarks, right? Quirky quarks, I guess you could call it. I don't know. But up and down are the key ones for protons and neutrons. Now, up quarks have a 2/3 charge. Okay, less than 1. That's a 2/3 charge. Down quarks have a minus 1/3 charge. Now, don't let this fractional charge thing be a problem for you, okay? A AA battery has 1.5 volts. Well, that's fractional out of the box, right? And it's more than 1. It's less than 2. Now, imagine if the battery's a little bit depleted. You can test it and see that it might only have 0.6 volts instead of 1.5 volts. So that's a plus 2/3 charge on this, on the battery. So that's what up quarks have. They have a plus 2/3 charge. Well, what about the minus 1/3 charge? Is that odd? Not really. You can deplete a AA battery down to, they had 1.5 volts initially, but deplete it until it only reads 0.33 volts. And then just reverse the red and the black leads, and it'll read negative 0.33 volts. Okay? So it's just a matter of how you test the charge. Okay? So fractional charge is not really a big deal. Okay? And we see it all the time. Now, in the case of protons have a plus 1 charge. And as mentioned, protons and neutrons are made of these little things called quarks, and they're bad boys. Okay? So how do you get a positive 1 charge in a proton if it's made of 3 quarks that each have fractional charge? Further, how do you get a 0 charge on a neutron that's also made from these charged quarks, and 3 of them at that? To get a plus 1 charge for a proton out of 3 quarks, you need 2 up quarks. So that's 2/3 plus 2/3 equals 4/3. And 1 down quark, which is minus 1/3. And what's that equal? 4/3 minus 1/3 is 3/3, which is 1. So there's your 1 charge. Neutrons have a 0 charge. So to get a zero charge out of 3 quarks, you have to have 2 down quarks. Minus 1/3 plus another minus 1/3 equals a minus 2/3. And now you can see if you add an up quark to that pair of quarks, that's a plus 2/3 value, then the minus 2/3 plus a positive 2/3 yields a net charge of 0. So, in other words, why did I go through all this? Because if you want to change a neutron into a proton, then you only have to have one quark that changes in the neutron. One of those down quarks just has to change to an up quark, and it goes from minus 1/3 to plus 2/3 charge. That way, we have 2 down quarks in the neutron. Previously, they went from minus 1/3 plus minus 1/3 to 2/3 plus minus 1/3, which equals 1/3. I know, we're adding this all up. And added to the other third quark in the neutron, which is the 2/3, gives us 3/3 or a positive 1 charged proton. If you do the math, you'll see that it works. So this process occurs in stars. The quarks and the neutrons will change. And the change is accomplished through high-energy particles and the bombardment of high-energy particles under the incredibly hostile conditions in the nucleus of the star, okay, in the core of the star and in the surrounding plasma around the core. Now, if we look at the other process that occurs, there's another process that can create these elements after iron. And one of these other processes is called the R process. What's that? Well, R stands for rapid process. And like the S process, it's a way to get neutrons changed into protons to go further down the table. But the R process, when I talked about supernovae, the R process is a process that's made rapidly. It happens rapidly. And this is the realm of the supernovae, where in the initial pressures of the supernova, which are absolutely stupendous, all right, this rapid process occurs, and we actually see what's called rapid neutron capture as opposed to that slow neutron capture that we just talked about. So rapid process will also create a bunch of these elements. So these get spread to the interstellar medium through supernovae, through the S process, okay? And the S process doesn't necessarily happen. In fact, it won't happen actually with a supernova. The S process, that neutron capture, that happens in stars like the sun. So when the star like the sun dies, it'll bloat into a red giant, and it'll basically puff off some outer layers of itself and finally leave just a hot core behind, which will become a white dwarf. And those outer layers are going to move off slowly and eventually disperse and mix with the interstellar medium. And they will have all the elements in there that were made from the S process, all the elements that were made when the star was originally made with elements from another star that blew up before it. And so it's going to form this rich assortment of materials from which to make another star system somewhere, So now as this matter makes its way through the interstellar medium, it'll collide with other matter. And in an absence of any general direction of a gravitational force in the interstellar medium, any concentration of mass anywhere can start a mass concentration. And this, if this happens, then it's basically going to become a focal point. This will attract more and more and will create an accretion disk. And the accretion disk will actually end up having variations of mass in itself. And these will eventually form self-condensing knots of material. And these knots within the accretion disk will form from those uneven spots in the disk, and they will grow in size, leading to clumping within the accretion disk. So that clumping will eventually become planets. And that is basically where we come from, where we have, where the sun comes from, we're going to get to. But so this clumping will end up becoming basically the solar nebula from which the star our sun and the planets will have formed in. Now, when we talk about all this, we do want to know, when we ask the question, where did our sun come from? Well, we know how it formed, but where did it come from? Where in the galaxy did it form? Did it form right where it is? Did it form 1,000 light years away? Did it form 45 feet away? I mean, the sun and where it formed has been one of the most perplexing questions in astronomy. In order to figure out where the sun formed, we'd have to find other stars just like it in every way. The sun has twins out there. It has siblings, as we call them. All right. And now we've talked about clusters of stars in SkyTour Livestream and here on SkyTour Radio. We've talked about clusters as stellar nurseries, the place where many stars are born, and then through mutual gravitational interactions and orbiting each other, they can get ejected from the cluster and move off on their own. It's kind of like the universe mimics life here on Earth in a sense, or we mimic life in the universe. Our children grow up and then they disappear after a while, right? They take off on their own. Well, stars are formed in clusters, and after a period of time, they will disperse in that cluster and move off on their own. So where then is the sun's stellar nursery? Where is our sun's remnant, at least, of a stellar nursery? We see thousands of such locations in our galaxy, and then others too. I mean, we look at stellar nurseries all the time in SkyTour Livestream, and we talk about them here on the radio show. We've taken many photos. We can even see stellar nurseries in other galaxies. And I featured on SkyTour, we actually featured the other night a view of Messier 33, Charles Messier's number 33, which is a galaxy, a fairly loosely wound galaxy in the constellation of Triangulum. And we could actually see clumping there. We could see clusters, and we could actually see stellar nurseries, the birthplaces of stars from 2 million plus light years away. So sometimes they're actually pretty pronounced. And that particular galaxy has a fairly pronounced set of them. Now, it was once thought that our sun was part of another local group of stars that are moving through the neighborhood. And that group, which Daryl has mentioned earlier, actually, when we talked before, is the Ursa Major moving group. In particular, the stars of the Big Dipper. You look at the Big Dipper and you say, wow, those are all pretty bright stars. Well, could it be that we were actually all formed together? And it turns out when they did some computer simulations, with some fairly high-end computers, that it really has ruled that out. No, the Big Dipper is not, the Ursa Major moving group is not our birthplace. It just happens to be coming through the neighborhood. And now we're back on our own. It's like, are you my daddy? Oh, he's not my daddy. Who's my daddy? And we don't know. So, but we do have clusters that have stars very much like the sun. And when we look at a cluster, all the stars in the cluster are born together. And they are going to be about the same type. They'll be about the same chemical makeup. And they will be the same temperature, pretty much. And they will initially be moving all in the same directions. So would that leave us some clues? I think that the most important thing here is we formed 4.6 billion years ago. And in that time, we've gone around the galaxy more than 19 and a half times. So in that time, we have actually seen a whole lot of changes occur around here. Stars have whipped through our neighborhood, and any evidence of our original formation has long since been dispersed. At most, we can find our siblings and find out if we can see other stars that are absolutely like our sun. Now, there was another possibility that was raised in recent years, and that was that since the clusters out there that have stars very nearly the same kind and very nearly the same age are all born together in groups, could it be that there's this one cluster called Messier 67? It's relatively close at 2,800 light years away. The stars are kind of similar to the sun, similar a little bit in type, and similar in chemistry to the sun. So the question becomes, were we born in Messier 67 when there was a lot of gas there? Or was it that we were ejected from that cluster afterwards through some type of gravitational interaction? So was Messier 67 our home? Now, how could we be ejected and go such a distance away in 4.6 billion years? Well, first of all, to be ejected, you have to understand something called the N-body problem. And that's N, that's the letter N, as in November, N-body problem. And the N-body problem is something that would have to be solved too, and that is to say that the gravitational interactions of N number of objects, all these stars in the cluster, in other words, acting on the sun, could have all summed to the point where they caused the star to be ejected from that cluster. And we could see that this could happen. However, one of the problems we have is that we have to have an issue with gravitational stability. It has to be a long-term gravitational stability to have a planetary retinue like we have with all the planets. And you know, some stars will be ejected from a cluster over time. We see it. We see it here, and it happens in all clusters very likely. So, in fact, my study in astronomy when I was getting my degree, I actually found B stars, not O stars, but B stars, another hot blue type stars, that were actually similarly ejected from the clusters they formed in. Right? These hot OB associations are called. And I found these B stars running away, and they're called runaway stars. And these were speeding out of the galaxy at high speed, never to return. They had the escape velocity, you know. And so if they ever, you know, if we could ever examine them, we would probably think that they probably don't have any planets. And I will tell you why in a minute. But I did find a number of them. A number of them. So Messier 67 then seemed like a possible candidate, you know. And the sun is moving at 67,000 miles per hour away from the cluster. Okay, that's promising. We were ejected possibly at that speed. Okay, that's 108,000 kilometers per hour. So that shows us something, right? But you see, there's another thing that goes on in a galactic disk. Star clusters tend to bob up and down like corks in the ocean as they're perturbed by other gravitational influencers around them. And they will tend to bob around. And M67's bobbing motion is 5 times greater than the sun's. The sun should reflect a similar bobbing motion if it was ejected this recently on a cosmic timescale. But computer simulations show that the two that our sun does not have nearly that motion. All right. And the other thing is, it showed that 2 or 3 of the very larger stars in that cluster would have to have aligned at just the right alignment to provide a gravitational slingshot to shoot us out of that cluster. But there's a problem, and it's a major one. The speed required to slingshot us away would also be way too much for a young set of orbiting planets to tolerate. And these would literally have been shredded in the process. Shredded or left behind. So the gas disk, the accretion disk around the star, is actually very fragile. And if you start moving the star with rapid speed, then there's another thing that would happen if they could possibly survive. As the star is moving away at high speed, the planets that the condensing clouds, which might be in a circular orbit, would tend to be made into elliptical orbits. All right. So we know that if Earth was in elliptical orbit, then life would be different here if it happened at all. We would bake and freeze alternately, right? So we just need to find a star like a sun to give us clues to our origins, okay? And that's leading up to this next little piece here, because and before I get there, I'm going to turn it over to Amanda here in a second just for to ask a question. But we need to find a star like the sun to give clues to our own origin, okay? Now, before we move further, I just want to ask Amanda. Amanda, are there any questions out there at this time?
Well, there was a bit of a trip. I see people were telling some jokes in chat about astronomy and space and stuff, and I misread. It was like the opening, it was the setup to a joke, and I misinterpreted it. So yes, I put it down as a question, but then I got the punchline and realized it was a joke. So please ignore chat for the next few minutes.
You now have to share that with us.
Well, see, Lib asked me how you organize a space party. And I thought he meant like a star viewing party, which you and Daryl have both done. So I said, well, I think Daryl went through his local astronomy club that he used to belong to, and Mark was probably word of mouth, but, you know, you could probably self-advertise. I said, I'll ask, because I know both of them have done it.
And he was shaking his head, wasn't he? Just shaking his head, going, what are you talking about? This is a joke.
Well, no, he said you plan it.
Yes, Planet.
Yeah. Yeah, and the sad thing is I've heard that before.
Yeah, but
I wasn't thinking. It was such a good setup. I actually fell for it again. So thanks, guys. I'm glad everyone's having a good time out there tonight.
Well done, Lib. Well done.
Yeah, you got me. But it's cute. But I mean, like I said, I know you guys both have done star viewing parties. How would you go? I mean, I would love to attend something like that. Where do I look? How do you get something like that for him? Because that sounds like a good time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's
tips.
There's astronomy clubs, and there's also, of course, with COVID, see, things have changed. There used to be yearly gatherings that you could go to. The Texas Star Party was one, and there's other gatherings like that. There are California groups that get together and they go do deep sky watching. In fact, I was invited to go to Arizona because I was going to be there the previous week to go out into the really, really, truly dark skies, Bortle 0 to 1 skies of the mountains, and do a star party out there. But I'm not going to be able to stay that long, so I had to forego it. But I still have to get the observatory done, so that's the priority. So no, I get it. As far as planning when this will be, a virtual tour like we're doing is probably the best bet right now. Because we don't want anyone getting sick. Of course, we avoided it here. The state of Connecticut is actually one of the lowest infection rates in the whole country. I mean, they're all getting better. So I think that conferences and conventions, which have star parties and sky watches in them, are going to return in the coming year for sure. But with the pandemic, people are going to just they're being overcautious, which they should. So when we do this, we are going to do the Messier Marathon, and I can't believe I agreed to do it. Okay, I guess I'm going to have to just probably sleep the whole previous day. And then probably, I'm going to have to force myself to stay up, near the end of the marathon, I'm sure. But if Daryl is willing to help out and he's going to be around, then maybe we can basically kick each other to stay awake, right? Would hope.
Unless he already fell asleep.
Yeah.
And he might not be a good alarm clock for you.
No, he won't.
I guess by default I'll have to be there since I've been pushing for this for a year and a half.
If you choose not to show up,
It's in March? Okay. I have to make sure I rest for a few days beforehand and have nothing planned for a few days after.
I don't care what's going on.
I will be there.
Bail on us.
I will be there with bells on.
You will be publicly flogged by Daryl and I for having to go through this without you.
Yeah. No, there's no way. I mean, I couldn't imagine what would keep me away from that.
Yeah.
That sounds too cool.
Yeah. So I think I see one joke in the chat there. You wrote, "Don't listen to Adams. They make everything up."
Oh, we have a ton. We have an absolute ton.
Well, let's hear some.
Marco wanted to let us know an electron walks into a bar and keeps going. We have Lib asks, when is the moon the heaviest? When it's full. Yeah, these are. There were more. I'm trying to get to them. I'm trying to copy and paste as we go, but I can't do that while I'm having a conversation with you guys. So, there's keep them coming, guys. I love lame jokes.
They're very funny.
Yeah,
they're very funny. Yeah.
There was Lib actually posted a meme. Said the universe is made out of protons, neutrons, electrons, and morons.
See, I always say we talk about atomic particles, protons, electrons, neutrons, muons, gluons, and so ons.
Yeah, so ons and so forths, yeah. Yeah, I heard that one too. They're cute, though. I mean, keep them coming, guys.
Yeah. Yep. So, we were talking earlier about finding the sun's twin. And what do we mean by a sun's twin? Okay. Well, we need a star that's really an identical stellar type to the sun. The sun is a type G. Okay, its spectral class is G. So of the OBAF GKM, it's a G type star. So it's more of a whitish yellow star, and not an orange star, but like a whitish yellow. And it's only 2 levels into the G. So the G goes from G0 to G9. So the G2 is what we are. And then because we're a normal star that's fusing hydrogen into helium, like what most normal stars do, it's called a dwarf, which is kind of a silly name because their stars are far from dwarfs. And the Roman numeral 5 designates dwarf. And that also says it's a star that's on what we call the main sequence, which is the main path that all stars are on. All right, when they're born, they will be fusing hydrogen into helium from the hottest, bluest star to the coolest, reddest star. When they're born into any of those spots, that is where they remain for the entire life that they're burning, fusing hydrogen into helium. When they run out, their path changes. They move off that line and they start heading up above this line and do various motions depending on their mass. The mass of the star determines everything else in its life from the very beginning. And stars don't often lose weight until later on in their lives. All right. So when they're born with a certain mass, they pretty much keep the same mass, and all through their lives, as they're fusing material. Well, the process is, as this material is fusing and we're getting energy released, the energy release is also causing mass loss on the star, because protons and high energy protons and electrons are streaming away from the sun at high speed in all directions, and they have mass. Okay, and those masses, the masses they have are minuscule, to say the least, but there's many of them. So the sun is suffering mass loss also every moment of every day, but it is a negligible mass loss, right? Now, when we looked for our twin star, we had to find a star that was acting just like our sun in every respect, but there was one part that was most important. The star that we were looking for, that was our sibling, our twin, true twin, also had to have the identical chemical composition. Now, what does that mean? It means not just hydrogen, the amount of hydrogen that like the sun has. Okay, when the sun was formed, it was formed from the solar nebula. All right, as we said. But what was that solar nebula? Where did it come from? All right, how did it develop? The solar nebula came from the previous explosions of past stars that have created elements in our periodic table. And so when we look at the composition of our sun, it has dozens of elements in it that the sun itself cannot make, but that the sun was made with in the very beginning. And in that outer envelope of the star, where we see plasma, the whole bright ball of the sun, all right, looks like it's all doing fusion, but it's not. The fusion's occurring only deep in the core. That's the only place it's happening. And all the rest of the material is in a plasma state. That is to say, there's no actual atoms. There's just atomic nuclei because all the electrons have been ripped off of the atoms from the stellar energy that is impacting them. And many of those atoms are streaming away from the sun. That's the solar wind. And when we look at that outer envelope of our sun, we're seeing an area of this hot plasma. But it's also showing us the atomic nuclei of all the other elements that the sun was made with when it was first made. Okay, so we look at that chemical composition with a spectrometer, which for Sky Tour Livestream, we actually have one that's going on one of our telescopes. And I think it'll be the Connecticut telescope that's going to get that one. And we will be able to look at stars and nebulae and so forth and figure out exactly what they're made from. We'll be able to look at the planet Uranus or Neptune or Jupiter and see what Jupiter and Uranus and Neptune's atmosphere is made of just by looking with this spectrometer. So you see, we get very exact values for how the composition is carried through into our solar system. And in the sun, we can get a really exacting view of how the chemical composition relates to other stars. And our spectrum is called the Fraunhofer spectrum, after Fraunhofer, who, of course, was one of the pioneers in spectroscopy who discovered this particular set of chemical elements in our sun's spectrum that show up. All right. And so the star that finally in 2018, these astronomers that were intrepid enough, they actually found a star that wasn't just similar, but it was actually identical to our sun, literally identical. And most importantly, it was identical in chemical composition. Would you like to hear the name? The star has a very romantic name. It's called HD 186302. Oh yeah, I know. You're all falling out of your chairs.
Say that on air?
Yeah, that's a good one. That's clever. Yeah, HD stands for Henry Draper Catalog. The Henry Draper Catalog entry 186302. Are we allowed to say that? I like that. That was a good one. You got me smiling, Amanda. It's a very romantic and memorable name. But guess what? It is our exact twin, right down to the chemical composition. It's 184 light years away, according to a database online, which, by the way, I want to talk to you about just real briefly. I think you would benefit from looking up Simbad, not Sinbad, okay, but Simbad, Simbad. There's over 2 million objects cataloged with details in this database. Simbad is an acronym for Set Identifications, Measurements, Bibliography, Astronomical Data. You know, so it's if you want to put it in a sentence, it'd be Set Identifications, Measurements, and Bibliography for Astronomical Data. And that's what it stands for. It's Simbad, and I think it's either .org or .com. You can check it out. And that will give you the information. And the star, again, is HD 186302. So that star, you see, is going to give us clues as to where the sun's origin cluster was. All right. It is certainly not there anymore. That's for sure. Gravity probably dispersed the stars, very likely. And that's something that, it's unfortunate. It's in a sense, it's like having a stellar amnesia, right? You wake up not knowing how you got here, but that you are here, and you want to know where you come from. And finding a twin sister star or twin brother star means it's very likely that the twin and our own star originated in the same place. So now that we know, what can we do? Do we simply trace the previous path through time using ours and our stellar siblings' motion to tell us where it was when it was formed? The problem, as I mentioned before, is that was 4.6 billion years ago, and we've gone around the galaxy almost 20 times, like I said. Lots of disturbances to our original orbits of the stars around the galaxies have taken place, and lots of material has shifted and changed, dispersed, and collected in that time. How can we reverse engineer this? That's the question. And figuring out where we came from would be the equivalent of catching a fly, and based on its direction of flight when caught, trying to figure out where it was 2 hours earlier. There's general assumptions you can make, but you don't have enough data. So with stars, we could figure out where gravitational centers may have been and work backwards. It's not an easy task. So another question is, are there planets around stars within objects that we know? Maybe that can help us. And the answer is, well, yes, there are. Okay. Many of you have been with us when we looked at Measure 44, which is called Praesepe, or the Beehive Cluster. It's a cluster that actually has planets in it. And we also know about the Orion Nebula, as well. So the Orion Nebula has a lot of young stars in it as well, and that's 24 light years across. So there's a lot of possibilities here, and the Lagoon Nebula, Measure 8, that we look at quite a lot during the summer months here. It's down in Sagittarius. It's beautiful. That's really cool. And it's actually, Measure 8 is actually being studied by the Speculus instrument in the Canary Islands. Speculus stands for Search for Habitable Planets Eclipsing Ultra-Cool Stars. And that particular instrument will bring us new data to tell us about these objects in the nebulae, and we'll learn more about the possibility of planetary formation in the nebulae with this. And that, of course, will be followed by the James Webb Space Telescope and the ESO's, European Southern Observatory's, extremely large telescope. So I'll tell you, that is really cool. Now, speaking of star clusters, just a little aside. Right now, it's about 10 p.m. in Connecticut here, and NGC 6811 is a star cluster in Cygnus, and it's high and it's overhead right now tonight. Now, the first two exoplanets ever discovered in a star cluster are there: Kepler 66b and Kepler 67b. And so they're high overhead. So the discovery begins, the search for our home commences and continues. I don't know, Daryl, if you had anything to add to that, if you wanted to, because I've kind of just gone on and on and on here, Are you there, Daryl?
Uh-oh. Yeah, mute, or did he step away?
I didn't see that. Well, it's okay.
No, he's here, not on mute. He might have dropped off.
Sorry, I hit the mute on my dongle by accident. No, I have nothing to add, Mark. Carry on.
All righty. Just wanted to give you a chance because I've been kind of going to town here. But Amanda, if you have any questions?
We do. Back when you were talking about the sun's twin?
Yeah.
Kathy wants to know, which direction in the sky it's located. Where is it?
I would love to show you, actually, but unfortunately, it's in the southern hemisphere at minus 70 degrees declination, so it's way down there.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not anywhere that we could show, unfortunately. I mean, the southern hemisphere folks can see it, but we can't.
Okay. Ronald actually had a bit of a follow-up to that. He was wondering, would the twin sun have a planet like ours? I'm not sure if you touched on that earlier or not.
I did not mention that because it's really too early to tell.
Yeah. Likelihood?
Not sure. This star was only found in 2018. So they're going to be doing studies, and I'm sure James Webb is going to look at this star too to see if there's any what we call residual infrared left over. So if there's residual infrared, then it means that maybe we're looking at a planetary circumstellar disk around the star. That's how we've discovered some of the other planets in the exoplanet arena, is by looking for these leftover infrared energy hanging around from the subtle heat being dissipated off of objects that are in a disk around the star. So, I don't know. I mean, I think that could it have planets? Maybe. I hope that we can do it. But again, we only found it in 2018. So we have a few years to actually go through and do observations, So any other questions?
Not at the moment. I will keep my eye on chat, though. If you guys we have a few minutes left till the end of the show. So if you do have some follow-up questions, throw them out now.
Sure. And, as I said, I just wanted to give you an update here. For those that were with Sky Tour live stream the other day, we actually took some pictures of some really beautiful objects, including a supernova remnant, the Veil Nebula in Cygnus, which is, again, high overhead right now. And that Veil Nebula, that material that's expanding outward, is exactly the kind of material we talked about. We talked about materials needed to make a solar system or a star system, because we can identify hydrogen, we can identify other elements, neon, we can identify oxygen in these gases that are expanding. And so we know that a supernova remnant is going to carry a just brilliant mixture of this periodic table material that will then make it possibly in collision with a cloud of interstellar dust and gas out there, could actually initiate some type of collapse of the cloud. And that cloud collapse could lead to the formation of a protostar. And again, Daryl, the other night, you asked a question about, if we look at the direction that the supernova remnant's moving, sometimes you see little chains of stars that dot right after each other. And
along the shock front.
Yeah, along the shock front, as you said the other night. And, the question is actually a very intelligent one. Is it possible that those stars, the formation of those stars, was caused by the collision of this interstellar material with a local gas and dust cloud near where these stars were? We don't see all the dust and gas in the universe, okay? We just don't. Only if a star is illuminating it will we see it. Only if a star is causing it to glow will we see it. And unless we have that, then we will have to do other studies. We have to do other things to detect it. We have to check, for instance, how the light is changing as it goes from one place to another. And that light can give away the fact that there was something else that it went through. In other words, so that's very interesting. When fast radio bursts first occurred, the fast radio bursts are coming from galaxies tens of millions of light years away or more. And these fast radio bursts go through the intergalactic medium to get to us. And by going through that medium, the light train coming to us from this millisecond pulse is altered by the material in between galaxies. And that resulting change to the light, something that's called a dispersion, is a process that makes it clear that it went through lots of other material, lots of other atoms of other types of gas in between the galaxies. And it changed our view of how we view the galaxies and their makeup and their way they're spread out. So there's a lot of things that the universe has to offer. And we learn a lot every day. I had someone in our chat on Sky Tour live stream say, you know, and he was right about this, by the way. He said, well, astronomers really don't know what the heck's going on. And, you know, maybe he was trying to be a little, you know, trying to give me a little jab or whatever. But you know what? I can't say it wasn't true. You know, astronomers have a pretty good idea with the science we know. But with the science we don't know, well, that could come back and bite us in the end. And you can't take a comment like that, you know, from someone and say, well, of course we know what we're talking about. Well, we don't. I mean, we know what we talk about to the level of the science we understand. But beyond that, welcome to the new cosmos, man. I really think that is really cool. You know, and many of you know I'm working on the New Sciences tour. It's a new view, a new look at science. And I'm doing that with Ket Torvaldsen in Norway. And so the New Science Tour was very successful in Norway last year when we did it. And we're writing books, and we're going to try and take the world by storm and try and show them some of the new science. And really it deals with cosmology and basically how the universe was formed at her end. I mean, for me, I'm taking and looking at the things we do understand and putting that into perspective for people to follow as well. In any case, that'll be coming up. And as Captain Kirk would say, red alert, or as Daryl would say, red alert. It is that time, folks. You've done it again. You've wasted 2 hours with us once again. It's a wonderful time we had. We enjoy wasting time with you. And we do say more than just nothings. We say some somethings, and I think that's very important. So I just want to thank you for attending and joining with us and hanging out with us. So on behalf of Amanda and Daryl, I want to say good night from Sky Tour Radio. Amanda, say good night, Amanda.
Good night, Amanda.
All right, and Daryl, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Good night, everybody.
There you go. All right, folks, you have a good night, and remember, keep looking up.